Hey guys, Luke Johns here from Fisherman's Warehouse. Happy New Year. We're going into 2025, and today I wanted to talk to you about 5 baits that are going to catch fish this year. Whether it's springtime, summertime, fall time, these are 5 fish catchers all year round. We're going to start it off. We'll go a little finesse to start off with. It's going to be that Neko worm. So this one right here, YAMAMOTO SENSEI worm, whether you're looking for a finesse option, something great, whether you're fishing bed fishing a school of fish, offshore, shallow water, all in between, you're able to adjust that bait, whether you're fishing deep water, shallow water, dirty water, all that kind of stuff. And it's an absolute fish catching machine. The next one, we'll kind of stick with the finesse line, going with a football head tungsten jig. This one right here, Picasso tungsten football head. I really like throwing a football head all year round. It's a really great way to not only catch a lot of fish, but also to catch a kicker fish. You can upgrade that thing, put a bigger trailer on the back of it, whether you're looking for an upgraded size bite at the very end of your day, anything along those lines. The football head jig is just an absolute staple and something that I never take out of my boat. Going into one that has absolutely made some waves over the last year or two. We've seen them win tons of tournaments, especially back east, whether it's the Elite Series and all those kind of tournaments, but throwing the hover rig. We've got one right here. This is an evergreen last ace rigged up on the owner range roller jig head, and this is a bait that I've really had a lot of fun with over the last couple of years. Now, one of the common misconceptions with this is that you can only throw it if you have live scope on your boat, and it's simply not true. It's very similar to throwing a single paddle tail swim bait or something along those lines. The one difference with this bait is that you just don't have as much tail kick, and it's just a little bit more of a finesse option to entice those fish to eat. We have absolutely hammered fish over the last couple of years with those single paddle tail swim baits like a Kitech, and they've just gotten a little bit used to it. So throwing something like a hover rig where it has a little bit more subtle action, it's going to put a lot of fish in the boat this year, guaranteed. Moving on to another one of my absolute favorite ways to catch fish is just throwing a simple jerkbait. I got a Bill Lewis scope stick right here. This is one of my favorites. And the reason I like this bait so much is because I can catch fish on it all year round, whether it's pre-spawn, post-spawn, mid-summer, into fall, everything in between. I'm always having a rip bait on the deck and always able to catch fish on it. And one of the cool things about a rip bait is that it's not only used for that clean water anymore. We found out how effective that thing can be in dirty water. We found out how effective it can be in the really warm water. And it's just something that I think a lot of people are underutilizing right now, and I think a lot of people need to keep it on the deck a couple more months out of the year. All right, and the final bait that I got for you guys is going to be a glide bait. So got 2 different options for you guys here. One of them, Roman made, your typical glide bait style, really a lot like an S waver where it just has that slow, subtle S action. And then you've got the SPRO shad. This one's got a bit more of a chopping action, so whether you're pumping your reel handle or slapping your rod tip on the water, either one of those two, that's how you're going to work that bait. Now, one of the great things about the glide bait is not only does it catch a lot of bigger fish, but it also shows you a lot of fish. So I use these baits a lot, not even to put fish into the boat, but just to tell me where fish are. Bass are such curious animals that they like to come out. They like to follow these things. They'll follow it all the way back to the boat just to get a look at it. And it really allows me, and could be you, to find a lot of the fish that I end up going back through and picking up a bait, like I mentioned earlier, or the Neko rig, throwing that thing in, something finesse, and get those fish to bite. So there you go. You got it. 5 different baits that I'm going to be throwing all of 2025, and I'm going to be catching them on it all year round, guaranteed. Whether it's the glide bait, the hover rig, jerk bait, a jig, or a Neko rig, you got to have them in your boat. Make sure you pick them up. We got all of this and more here at Fisherman's Warehouse. Welcome back to the Fisherman's Warehouse channel. Luke Johns here, and I want to talk to you guys a little bit about how to pick the right jerkbait. So as you guys can see, I've got my box absolutely filled to the brim with jerkbaits, probably 100 different rip baits in here. So ton of options. So it's a little bit overwhelming. You open this box up and you're thinking, gosh, what am I going to pick today? And why am I going to pick that? What's going to make me catch more fish in this box compared to the next one? So I've got a couple different options. I'm going to run through the different scenarios on why I would pick these baits and why I think they're good. So starting off, we've got some really small options in my box. So right here, I got a Lucky Craft pointer. I believe this is a 78 size. So super compact, small bait, and in a very natural color. You'll notice that's that famous ghost minnow color they have. The reason I like having a bait like that in my tackle box is when I go to a fishery where the water is extremely clear and the fish are really pressured, having a small extremely lifelike and smaller size bait is extremely effective in getting those finicky fish to eat. Going on to one of my other favorite baits, I've got the Megabass Vision 110 Plus One right here. If you're wanting kind of that same smaller size bait, but you want it to dive down a little bit deeper, of course, like I said, this is that plus one, so it's got a little bit longer bill on it, which allows this bait to dive down maybe into that 6 to 8, maybe even 9 foot range, depending on what size line you're throwing. So I really like picking this thing up when I want that smaller profile, but those fish are sitting just a little bit deeper than what I can hit with something like that small pointer. Moving on to probably one of my other all-time favorites, it's that Megabass Vision 110. Just the classic style. If you're looking for a 4 to 8 foot diving rip bait and you want just an all-around bait, this is a really great option. It covers all your bases. It's got good action, comes in a great variety of colors. And this is really when I'm basically first one out of the box. If I just need to get a pace for how the day's going, this is probably going to be one of my #1 baits to tie on right there. And then moving on to one of my all-time favorite big fish catchers. So if I'm fishing a place like Clear Lake, or I'm fishing just for a bigger bite, I need that kicker fish, but I know they want a rip bait, I'm tying on that Bill Lewis scope stick. This is that 120 size, so you can see this thing compared to that Vision 110. It's like basically like twice the size when it comes down to how tall and how much longer it is. This is a really, really effective bait for getting those bigger bites. Comes fresh out of the box with some really sharp and beefier treble hooks than a lot of the other rip baits. And it comes in a lot of great color options for you guys. So whether you're fishing for extremely finicky fish or you're fishing for your kicker bass that you need on tournament day, throwing a rip bait is a great option to do it. And you can pick from any style, any color, everything in between. It's all got you covered. Of course, we've got all of these options and a ton more here at Fisherman's Warehouse, so make sure you come by and check them out. Hey guys, welcome back to the Fisherman's Warehouse channel. Today, I want to talk to you about picking the right line for your setup. So, starting off with one of my favorite setups to throw, whether it's a top water bait, maybe flipping, pitching, punching, basically all that big, heavy, fun stuff, I'm always going to resort to a braided fishing line. Now, the reason for this is two options. If you're throwing a top water bait, braid floats. So that's a major key, just like monofilament is. But throwing a braided fishing line, having that floating option on a topwater is absolutely crucial. And then the other one, if you're flipping, doing anything in heavy, tight cover, making short pitches, punching, all that kind of stuff, I always pick up a braid because it has zero stretch and it's pretty abrasion resistant. And you can also get a really high pound test for the line diameter. Moving on to another braided line. This is more of my light braid category. Basically anything 20 pounds and less, I throw this on all of my spinning rods. The reason I like braid on my spinning rods, like I said before, is it has no stretch in it. So you have really sensitive, options with this. And especially when you're throwing really deep, light finesse baits and you want to be able to feel those super subtle bites, I always like throwing a braid. But with that, you might be asking, well, of course, this one, especially, for example, bright pink, the fish are going to see that. So that's when you're going to want to pick up another additive. You're going to throw a leader onto that thing. And right here, we're throwing that SUNLINE shooter. So this is my favorite leader line right here. So whether it's 7, 8, 10-pound line, I always like throwing the shooter line on there. It's got a little bit less stretch than a lot of the other fluorocarbons, and it's a little bit more stiff, but it allows me to have a lot of confidence in that leader line, and I've always put a lot of fish in the boat with this thing. So it's a great option when you want something clear on the end of that, colored braid. Moving on to my next one, this is an all-around fluorocarbon. So whether you're throwing a bottom contact bait, whether you're just throwing a moving bait like a spinner bait, or a swim bait, something along those lines, I'm going to reach for the SUNLINE Sniper, the FC Sniper right here. The reason I like this is it's a very just well-balanced line. It's got the right amount of stretch to it. It's got great abrasion resistance, and it's just got all the attributes that you want to be able to do basically anything in your tackle box with. And it comes in a lot of different options for you, whether you're wanting a bigger line or, all the way down to your small, 6, 8, 10-pound test, that kind of stuff. The final one that I like throwing, so when you pick up a treble hook bait, something like a jerk bait or a crankbait, one of the major key things that you need to have is a bit more stretch in your setup. So you're going to be throwing your fiberglass rod, all that fun stuff, but having a little bit more stretch in your line can make a huge difference. So that's when I'm reaching for the FC crank. Now, the thing with the FC crank is that it has more stretch than your typical fluorocarbon, but it also has a ton of abrasion resistance, a little bit more than a lot of the other lines that I mentioned here. So the nice thing is, if you're throwing a crankbait, especially one that you're grinding through the bottom, going over a bunch of nasty stuff, you're going to find yourself needing to retie a lot less. So I think that covers all your bases. If you guys need anything, whether it's a SUNLINE product or any other line brand, we got it all down here at Fisherman's Warehouse. So make sure you come check us out. Hey guys, Luke from Fisherman's Warehouse. I'm going to be talking to you guys about how to rig a hover rig today, mid-strolling, whatever you want to call it, a bunch of different names for it, but a very popular technique right now in bass fishing. So I've got a couple different setups on how we can do this, and we're just going to dive straight into this thing. So the first one being how to rig this thing with a jig head, and then the other one being how to use just like a 90-degree jig hook with a nail weight in the front of it. All right, for the first rig, I've got an Owner range roller head right here. Now, this is my absolute favorite head, and I'm going to rig this thing up onto a Evergreen Last Ace. This is one of my favorite soft plastics for rigging this thing, and you're just going to rig it up exactly how you would rig your normal jig head. A real big key to this bait is that you want this to be extremely flat and straight on your hook. So let's see if I can get this thing first try looking perfect, and boom, voila. So you really want it to be extremely straight on there. The reason for that is this bait is so crucial that you get it rigged straight because of how this thing moves in the water. It rolls back and forth as you're reeling this back in and shaking it. And if you have any sort of imperfection on your hook, if it's, you know, a bit crooked, maybe there's not enough on and it's kind of pushed up more hanging down like this, it's going to totally affect your action. So just make sure you have it rigged extremely straight and just straight up and down on the hook, just like that. Another way you can rig this thing, this one is a Picasso speed drop head, and the reason I like this one is when you're fishing vertical. So this was a head a little bit more for casting with the range roller. This one, if you're dropping straight down, doing more of the moping rig as they call it, I really recommend a head like this because it'll sink a little bit faster, but you still get the same good rolling action with it. Finally, my other favorite way to rig this thing, especially if you want to have a lot of action, is I'm going to rig it with a jig hook. So this is an Owner 90-degree jig hook right here. And the way that you rig this bait is you're actually going to put your jig hook point right into the top of the bait right there. And then you're going to run it down the spine just like you would any other hook. And then back out the back. And I'll show you what you're going to be left with is that hook is going to sit right down on the inside of there. And it's going to be just poking right out of the back. But you'll notice that your hook eye is actually about 1/4 to 1/2 inch back from the nose of the bait. And then all you do is take a tungsten nail weight. Depending on how deep you're fishing, you can adjust your size on that. And you're just going to push that right into the very front of the bait. And then you're going to have that sitting right there, just like that. And this rig offers you a lot more action than your typical range roller head or a jig head style. Because it's going to give you a lot more freedom of movement and it's going to dart through the water more so than just a simple rolling action. So I like using this thing when the fish are really aggressive and you're really trying to get a reaction bite. And then if you're going for more of the slow roll, I really recommend that Owner range roller head on there. But if you guys have any questions on how to do this, let us know in the comments below. And of course, all of this stuff is available here at Fisherman's Warehouse. What's up, guys? Luke from Fisherman's Warehouse here. I want to talk to you guys today about how to rig a Neko rig, an absolute staple in the bass fishing world. So we're going to jump straight into this thing. I've got two different worms for you here. We've got the classic YAMAMOTO Senko 5-inch, and then we've got the YAMAMOTO SENSEI worm. Two different options for you guys. And how you're going to rig this bait, same for both generally. So you're going to take your worm. I'll do this thing on the Senko just to show you guys a little bit bigger. And you're going to start off by pushing your nail weight straight into the head of your bait. Now, I like to use a tungsten nail weight depending on the water depth that I'm fishing. Sometimes I'll use lead if I'm fishing really shallow and I don't want much added weight. But change your weight size depending on how deep you're fishing. And then the next thing I'm going to do, especially with a Senko with a thicker bait that I can fit one of these on, is I'm going to add in an O-ring. So you just grab your O-ring tool, and you're going to slide that O-ring on right into the dead middle of that bait. And I got it a little bit high up, but you can see we've got our black O-ring on there right there. I usually kind of try to match my O-ring color depending on my bait. Of course, I want to show up a little better for you today, so we got the black on pink. And then I'm going to take my hook, a wacky hook, or in this case, I like to use a owner mosquito hook a lot of the times, especially if I'm fishing open water, not around a lot of cover. This is a phenomenal hook, really fast hookup ratio, and you're just going to slide that hook right underneath your O-ring. And that is all you're going to do for your Neko rig right there. And same way that I would rig this thing on this YAMAMOTO SENSEI worm, I would just do it without the O-ring on there. I'd have my nail weight in the front, and then I would just go straight through the middle of this thing, and you've got two completely different worms here, rigged up Neko style. This one got a little bit of a weedless hook on there as well, but two great options for you guys. And if you guys aren't throwing this thing, you've got to give it a try. It's an absolute staple and one of my biggest fish catchers all year round.